Good evening. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education on Monday, July 23rd. And the pledge. Do we have anybody leading the pledge? If you would stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. Madam Superintendent, any comments? Approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes for the board meeting from July 2nd, which was the organizational meeting, and the July 9th meeting consolidated?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Citizens' comments. I believe we have a few of them this evening. I'd just like to remind you that you are limited to 3 minutes apiece, and we're not allowed to comment back. So you're more than welcome to give us your comment, but we can't give you feedback. So I just want you to know how it's going to go. The first one is Mr. David Glenn.
I presume you go to the podium?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My name is David Glenn. I'm a retired plant physiologist, and from 2010 to 2015, I conducted ozone research and its effects on horticultural crops at the Appalachian Fruit Research Station. I don't want to talk about the effects on plants, but I would like to give you a perspective of ozone effects on human health and ozone levels in Jefferson County. Ozone, first of all, is not generated as a primary pollutant. It's a secondary pollutant that is formed when volatile organic compounds and nitrous oxides, which are produced through combustion, which the rock wall plant will be producing, when they combine in the presence of sunlight and high temperature, that is when ozone is produced. This particular plant will be producing VOCs and NOxs, as they're called. In Jefferson County, during the period of time that I conducted my research, I compared the ozone levels that I measured with those that are in Martinsburg. And Martinsburg has the state of West Virginia weather station. The correlation between the two is extremely tight. And I think if you look back on the data from Martinsburg, you'll have a very good idea of what ozone levels are in Jefferson County. Now, typically what happens is ozone is low during the night or zero, and then it rises during the course of the day because of the sunlight and the heat. Typically in June, July, and August, ozone levels will be 40 to 60, sometimes a little bit higher than that on average. Those are the maximums that you achieve around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. What does that mean in terms of human health? The U.S. EPA has a 70 part per billion threshold for levels of ozone which then become to threaten human health. When we have high temperatures in Jefferson County getting in the mid-90s or upwards of 100, such as we had several weeks ago, air quality alerts come out. There's an orange air quality alert. That means that ozone and other particulate matters are now damaging to human health, particularly school children, babies, and the elderly. Jefferson County every year has high periods of ozone levels, which are an irritant to these particular susceptible groups. This particular plant will be producing ozone indirectly as a result of its VOCs. One of the interesting things about this plant, it has a very tall smokestack. I think the purpose of that is to diffuse these VOCs to the east, to Leesburg, to Washington, D.C., hopefully out to sea. But one of the interesting things about ozone is it's a heavy gas. So once it's formed, it begins to settle out. And what it will do is it will settle out in the nearest proximity, which will be Jefferson County. So there is no doubt that ozone levels will be increasing within Jefferson County as a result of this plant. Just as an interesting sideline, There are many valleys, isolated valleys in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and the eastern United States that are not anywhere near a plant that produces these VOCs, and yet they have extremely high ozone levels. The reason is this high density of ozone. It's just like water. It flows to the lowest point, and it accumulates. And until there is a storm that flushes it out of those watersheds, it's going to sit there and accumulate and potentially cause damage to plant life as well as to human health. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Regina Hendricks.
I'm Regina Hendricks. I've lived here. I've lived here since 2009, and I'm a refugee from the Kanawha Valley, better known as, well, it's Charleston, it's our capital, but it's known as the Chemical Valley. And I came here to get away from it. So, well, my hair is on fire just to hear what they're planning to do to us. My family of 8, 6 of them have had cancer. And, you know, I will feel, if this pollution comes on us, I will feel like I have to move on. And I think a lot of other people will too. Why put this in one of the 2 places in the state that is gaining population? The only places that I know of that are gaining population is Eastern Panhandle and Monongalia County. And now we have the southern part of the state with thousands of acres of mountaintop removal site, which while they were blowing up my home, they told me we needed flat land. Well, put this on flat land someplace else. So, and the way this was done is so dirty because they secretly passed it through via a project shuttle. And they kept it from us, from the people, so that we couldn't get upset about all this pollution. And from what I've been able to find out, they kept it a secret the whole time it was in the works. And it was a series of shady land deals and backroom trade-offs. So let me see what else. Oh, I want to give you a little bit of information about what happened in Charleston, West Virginia. In Charleston, West Virginia, we had an explosion of the Bayer plant. That was in 2008. And I left in 2009. So many family members had cancer. I just couldn't, at my advanced age, I didn't want to take a chance. And I have a brother in the Kanawha Valley who is dying. And, well, sisters with breast cancer, my parents with with cancer. So I left in 2009, and in 2014, you probably read about it, where they poisoned the water with coal cleaning chemicals. And what happened is they had one water intake for 300,000 people. And is that me?
That's you, my love.
Okay. Well, they had one water intake for 300,000 people, and that was because that all the wells had been poisoned in the southern part of the state.
Diane Blust?
It's Boost.
Blust, sorry.
That's okay. Everybody gets it wrong. For those of you who are learning German, it means blossoming in archaic German. My name is Diane Blust. I'm a relatively new resident of Jefferson County, having moved here from Fairfax County in 2014. And from 2010 to 2014, I was the president of the Fairfax Coalition for Smarter Growth. Not the big Coalition for Smarter Growth in the D.C. area, but the Fairfax Coalition for Smarter Growth. and the head of the Sustainable Reston Project of the Coalition. I was also on the board of Reston Environmental Action for, I think, 2 years. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about smart growth. We all know that we need tax base in order to grow our county properly and to have a good education system in the county. And my feeling is that anything that will negatively impact or even be rumored to negatively impact the health of our school children could be a real detriment to the planned growth in Jefferson County. So I think we need to think about that very hard. I'm not a scientist like Mike, and so I, don't know all the science about it, but I do know if somebody told me that my child was going to go to a school just a couple miles away from a plant that was going to produce a lot of pollution, I would say, no, my child isn't going to go to that school. And the other thing that I worry about with this particular plant, which is going to be receiving heavy trucks with coal slag, which will be used in the process, what impact is that going to have on our roads in Jefferson County? I know that's not your thing, school is your thing, but, schools depend on good roads, so I think we need to consider that. So I really question if this type of heavy industrial plant is a good fit with our county. We have important agricultural businesses. We don't want pollution on that. And we have a reputation as a healthy community, just slightly removed from all the bad stuff that goes on in the inner suburbs and the outer and the exurbs. But we can reach, our residents can reach the jobs in Northern Virginia and D.C. So I think we really have to think about whether this plant is a good plant for our county and the future growth and development that we want to see here. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gail Colhurst?
I have a lot of notes. My name's Gail Colhurst, and I've been here for about 15 years, but this is the first time this year that I've decided to try to get a little bit active in the community and the government. I'm a member of the Sierra Club, and I wholly support everything that we're doing in the Eastern Panhandle to try to figure out what's going on with this plant and how it will affect our community. I have 2 granddaughters who are in the school system, and they will eventually be coming to Jefferson High School, which is close enough to be affected. We all moved here to get away, like Diane said, from some of the hardships and pollution of a more densely populated area. And I think what I've read about the plant was they consider this to be so rural, and yet they didn't take into consideration the 6,000 children that will be in all these schools with this great big plant in the middle of it. Now, if we were building North Jefferson right now and Roxall was already in place, would we ever even dream of building the school right next to the plant? I don't think so. So because it's happened in reverse, I don't think we should just stand by and say, okay, well, this is how it's going to be. But if there's anything we can do, I think it behooves all of us to make sure that the pollution is minimized, the disruption is minimized, the environment is safe for the children, especially in North Jefferson. It just breaks my heart that it's so close to that school. It's a beautiful new school, and anyway, so I'm here to urge you, the board, to try to do whatever you can to make sure that this all goes down in the best way possible for our children. Thank you.
Chris Kennan?
Hi, I'm Christopher Kennan. I'm a Jefferson County resident and a parent, and I'm a technology consultant, but by way of background, I've worked on Capitol Hill as a legislative staffer and then for a Fortune 100 company as a policy analyst. And so I've Also, just add by way of background, I'm a conservative Republican. I don't want this to get logged in as like a political issue. This is much broader than that. It's a school safety issue. It really is. And so that's why I'm here tonight, because I have serious concerns about this plan. And we've gone through the permit, and I've worked with Sierra Club technical experts, but there's 4 major pollution areas of concern. The first are the VOCs. As permitted, and compared to NEI data from the EPA, which the most recent is 2014, this would be number 2 in the entire state for VOC emissions. Now, VOCs have a range of impacts. They're all sort of unpleasant, but this plant is going to produce 6 that are known or suspected carcinogens. One of those, formaldehyde, is also a neurotoxin. It impacts children's intellectual development, their memory, learning, behavior, dexterity. The second pollution category is PM2.5. That's inhalable particulate matter, fine particulate matter. This is the stuff that goes into your lungs and stays there. Over time causes lung and heart problems, can cause cancer. It's very hazardous stuff. The third is ozone, which you've already heard about, which is also a primary indicator as a primary cause of asthma in children. So again, lots of breathing issues. The fourth is a little more unusual. Lead is actually in the permit as well. Airborne lead will be emitted from this plant. It's not a lot compared to these other pollutants, which would be major. The PM2.5 would be number 10 in the state. VOC is number 2 in the state. The lead's a small amount. But since we're in a school context, I think that has to be fully vetted. Sierra Club also believes that based on the inputs, there will be other heavy metals in this PM pollution coming from the plant. And so that's something that it really needs to be vetted. So we've got this global scale facility. It's going to have a 21-story primary smokestack. I think the next one is 10 stories and lots of trucks and operating 24/7. And West Virginia is a really big state. It's 24,000 square miles. And yet our county and our state government is actually subsidizing this location adjacent to North Jefferson Elementary and within 10,000 feet, less than 2 miles, of Jefferson High School, Wildwood Middle, and T.A. Lowry. And that's 30% of the entire student population of this county is going to be within 2 miles. And if you draw the circle out just a little bit further, 4 miles, you have both major property purchases that the school system has made on Old Eton Pike and Shepherdtown Pike. They'll be inside that, as well as Driswood Elementary. So you've got, it's by way of comparison, Rockwell, Mississippi, which is smaller than what they're going to build here, there's no schools within 4 miles. So it's really just a stark comparison. And I think this came about because the process has been broken, right? And Regina alluded to that. It was negotiated in secret. It was done with a special variance. I don't think anyone has advocated for the system, for the school system's long-term planning, for the health of the students and also the teachers in these schools. And so that's really why we're here tonight, is to ask 10 seconds, the board to be that advocate. And specifically, we think there's enough evidence here that the board members and the board as a group should call for a pause in site development at Rockwell, so that the board could undertake an independent, non-government expert review of the pollution and the pollution impact on the schools. And that's something that the permit process doesn't do. DEP said, look, there's no mandate that we have to study the impact on schools. We're not going to do it. We're not going to require it. So that's our request tonight. Thank you.
All right, consent agenda.
On the consent agenda tonight, you'll denote that we have a single deletion of a rescinded request for a transfer. However, I do have several introductions. We are in the hiring season, and we are very excited to have some wonderful folks join us tonight, and I will go in alphabetical order. First and foremost, here at our last board meeting, we introduced the new principal at South Jefferson Elementary School, which we were quite excited about, thus creating a vacancy at the assistant principal position. And we are very pleased to welcome tonight Ms. Jody Payne, if you could please stand up, who will be the new assistant principal at South Jefferson Elementary. She got her bachelor's degree in Western Illinois in reading and mathematics, and then is a reading specialist degree from WVU, and her educational leadership certification from Hood College. She is a very experienced teacher with 12 years in the Berkeley system, delivering exemplary reading education, great credentials, fantastic references. We're very, very excited to have her on board. And as we talked about, Jefferson is a family first kind of place, so did you bring somebody with you tonight for support, or that you'd like to introduce to us?
I did. My husband, Sid Payne, he's the one who brought me to West Virginia. I'm from Illinois, so he always grew up in Wheeling, West Virginia. so he brought me to this state. And then I have 3 daughters. This is my middle child. She's the only one at home this week. She is a nursing, she's going into her senior year at nursing at WVU. Another child just graduated. Actually, my oldest daughter just took a position the same day that Miss Mahoney hired me. My daughter was hired for the occupational therapist for Jefferson County.
You got the whole family working. You're killing it. You're killing it. The whole book. So, congratulations to South Jefferson. You guys are going to be hitting on all cylinders.
I'm
We're
very
really excited to have you
I
there.
just got to see the school today, and so I'm ready to go.
Wonderful. Well, welcome on board. Congratulations. We have another introduction today, and that is Miss Mindy Toller back here. If you could please stand up. I'd like to introduce Miss Toller as the new assistant principal at Shepherdstown Middle School. Woo-hoo. So, Ms. Toller comes to us with a bachelor's degree from Appalachian Bible College in elementary education and a graduate degree from Liberty University in educational leadership, administration, and supervision, and another 12-year, it seems to be the mark, exemplary 12-year career, straight 12 years of teaching, reading, and for leadership teams, SPL, led her local school improvement council, and has a great deal of experience working with and leading teams for students with disabilities and IEPs. And I'm sure she'll have an exemplary experience with Miss Horn, who's back there to support her. So anything that you'd like to share with us, Miss Toller? Welcome aboard. Or Miss Horn? About Miss Toller? Nothing you read on Facebook. But,
I just want to say we're really excited to have Miss Toller and her energy and enthusiasm. I think she's going to be a breath of air that we need to bring us into some new ideas for special education and getting our students to close that gap.
Mm-hmm.
I'm totally pumped. I love teaching. I love kids. It's why I wake up. And so I am really excited about it. I'm nervous just because it's a new challenge, but it's one that I think that I have been divinely appointed to for this time. So I am ready to go. And just for FYI, these lovely people, these 3 lovely people, Miss Arvon, Miss Horn, Dr. Gibson, gave me an interview in an airport on the phone. And so they were extremely flexible and gracious. So that was exceptionally innovative.
You were there caring for your father, and you will notice a theme throughout this evening. You can't care for other people's children unless you're willing to have your own people put their families first. So thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So
Awesome.
thanks for being here. Okay. Yay. And last but certainly not least, and there seems to be this Illinois connection tonight. I'm not sure where that's coming from. I am very pleased and proud after long process to introduce Mr. Matthew Wink, who we are proud to appoint as the new principal at Charlestown Middle School. Mr. Wink comes to us with 19 years of experience altogether in the classroom. He started when he was 7. I just want to point that out. With 6 of that as an assistant principal. He got his bachelor's degree from right here, Shepherd's College, local fellow. Got his master's from Illinois State. Maybe you guys cross paths at some point, and then got his school principalship degree from Marshall, the Thundering Herd. So, and then has spent much of his career as a mathematics teacher and has a strong background in mathematics, and then 3 years as an assistant principal in Berkeley and 3 years as an assistant principal in Maryland. So he has a great depth of experience. And for all of these folks, they had to go through quite a process to get here. We include both exercises and data disaggregation. They have homework before they even come to the interview. The application process now for Jefferson County actually includes taking an online test that covers your instructional competency as well as your social, emotional, empathy skills. And we take those scores into consideration before we even decide who to put through the torturous process of interviewing screening and screening for a second interview. So we are very, very proud to have these exemplary folks. And Mr. Wink, if you, speaking of family, if you got some folks with you, we'd love, because it's a family commitment.
I was able to bring my wife. She's actually a media specialist at Blue Ridge Primary. My two young men are at home being watched by her parents, so I'm thankful that they were there. I would just like to say thank you, Dr. Gibson, Mr. Dingus, Mr. Blanc, everybody. It's been a whirlwind 2 weeks, and it's really helped me to look intrinsically to decide, yeah, this is definitely what I want. This is what I'm cut out for, and I look forward to leading Charlestown Middle School into the next 10, 20, 30 maybe years. I'm only 20-some, according to Thank you for the opportunity.
Long live Panthers. Thank you. And thank you to the Charlestown Middle School folks who came out to support. Bless you. Way to go. Way to go.
And he needs to give his fashion consultant a bonus because whoever dressed him dressed you appropriately
In
tonight.
Panther colors. There you go. You can't beat it.
All right.
Are y'all kicking us out?
You're welcome to stay. Thank you.
So, yeah, actually, he will take your picture and ask you some questions. And take a donation. No, okay, not that last part. Don't fall for that. Don't fall for that.
Okay. You can come back in.
All right. Any other changes or to the consent agenda?
No, ma'am.
Do we have a motion?
So moved. Second.
All right. Any discussion?
Vote on everything except the assistant superintendent contract so that we can at least discuss those, because I know we had a chance to discuss Dr. Gibson's contract, but we have not had a chance to discuss those. And then we can come back and okay those later, rather than just okaying those.
Later as in later in the meeting? Or
Yes.
later as okay.
Yeah.
So you want to amend
Can we
the
have
motion?
amend the motion to include everything but the assistant superintendent of instruction contracts, and then we can discuss those in the executive session, and then we can come back and.
A second. Okay. All in favor?
What do you want? I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Just remove item number 43 on the HR agenda and discuss during executive session and then come back and vote on that.
Just so we have a chance to discuss them.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second on the amended motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. So
we have to move
now we need to move on the amended motion. So do we have a motion to accept the amended motion?
So moved.
Second? Am I going in circles?
Yes.
Yeah, we've already
We
done
already did
that one. We need to accept the consent agenda now, I think.
Yes.
Yes. The rest
So,
of the consent agenda.
Accept
with
the consent
amended.
agenda,
There
the
you go.
amended consent agenda.
You got it.
All right.
And that's so moved. And then second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Don't get it together.
So now we are down to unfinished business.
Yes, ma'am. At our last meeting, we put out for public comment the nepotism policy in Chapter 2 so that we could resolve the conflict of our previous policy. And we have received 0 public comments on the policy. at the last public meeting, Ms. Roper had asked a question regarding the final sentence of the first paragraph, which I had then contacted and followed up with our attorney and then sent the information out as a follow-up that is not an absolute requirement. Boards are not required to adopt a nepotism policy. The state doesn't force them to. So the board has the freedom to amend that section if they so choose.
Well, let's have a motion so we can
Get her on the
discuss
floor
it.
for discussion.
So moved. Second.
To recuse myself.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second on the policy. Ms. Roper's recusing herself. Discussion.
So it looks like the issue with being so, it gives more flexibility in the new policy to not have it so specific. And
Yes,
it
ma'am. The
gives
old
more
policy
options.
named, if you'll look up at the old policy, I mean, it named very specific. It went so far as father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, husband, wife, uncle, aunt, cousin, nephew, niece, father-in-law, mother-in-law, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, stepfather, stepmother, stepson, stepdaughter, stepbrother, you can't make this up. Stepsister, half-brother, or half-sister, or any person living in a household with an employee.
Including the cat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
it was just,
Right.
it was fairly pervasive and I think probably difficult in a county of our size to, I'm surprised it hasn't been an issue before, to tell you the truth.
Any other discussion or proposed changes to the proposed policy?
Do we have a motion?
Yep, we do.
We do.
I thought so, but I wasn't sure. I got a little competition. back
I know,
here.
it's a little distracting.
I think the way that it is written now is the way that we have had to handle certain situations before, which makes perfect sense, but I guess it does give a little bit more clarification on that.
All right.
I
Well,
don't see any problem with it.
okay. Well then, all in favor of adopting the revised nepotism policy?
Now, that is how it's written here.
Correct.
Okay. I'm in favor of the way. Thank you.
All right, so we have,
Aye.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right.
So, yeah, we probably need to get Ms. Roper back.
All right, new business.
Well, I'm back with the CEFP again. We need to go out for the CEFP. However, I want you to know that we need to be, I'd like to be proactive about this, the CEFP again. The comprehensive educational facilities plan. We do it every 10 years. Lots of times it's called the 10-year plan. The SBA tells me that in a short week or so, maybe two, they'll have a real good plan. I don't want us to go out until we know from the SBA that the plan that we're going out with is what we're supposed to be doing. So, but being proactive, if you all could approve the fact that we go out only when the SBA is sure of what the plan is going to be, then we would go out at that point. Wouldn't go out this week or the next week. It'd be as soon as we're sure about that point. I talked to Mike Hall this morning and this afternoon, and we've worked together 10 plus years. So I know Mike real well, and I know he told me as soon as they have something together, he would give me a call that moment so we knew exactly what it was. They have had to punt. They had a plan, and then that plan got changed again. Very much like Charleston will always be. And but what I'd like to do is we're going out for an architect once we know for sure that the SBA has went that way with their plan.
Ralph,
Yes.
as the new person, when you say go out, what are you
We would go,
referring to?
I actually wrote a bit of that for myself. We go out in the newspaper with an RFI, because we'd be asking for information. So the architects and other people who write the CFP plans and work with us with the CFP plans would then send us their information about themselves and their ability to pull this off. Then to write our CFP. What would happen is then I set up a committee. That committee will narrow it down to like three companies. Those companies will come in, do a presentation for you, and the board will decide who gets the position, who gets the company that's picked. So each one of them will have all kind of handouts and all kind of understanding, and they'll do some really good PR work to show you exactly what they can do and what others can do. But in the past, it's been about 6 or so that turned them in, some of them with a little background, and some of them that's done this over and over and over and over. So then at that point, we try to do what's best for the board and for Jefferson County, as we always do. And being proactive, I'd like to ask tonight the board's permission to go out when we know exactly what the SBA is willing to do for us and with this CFP process.
I'm sorry. I have another question.
Well, let's have a
We need a
motion,
motion,
and then we can have discussion.
Okay.
So do we have a motion for the comprehensive educational facilities plan to go out for
For RFI.
RFI?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Discussion.
Oh, sorry, discussion.
Okay.
I'm so
Sorry, we're going to get this together. We are.
Overseas too long.
Your husband helped us with the first one last time.
Oh, yeah.
He was actually on the committee. Did a great job.
I'm just a little confused. Is this a 10-year plan for our facilities? Or is this the one request for to build a school?
No. This is the 10-year plan for all our facilities.
All of the facilities.
And we'll have needs at all facilities. And we'll go over each facility, and we'll have all the information that we've always had with all these facilities, which gives you how many times that they were built on. It tells you how big they are, of course, how much it costs when they built it the first time, how many times that we've added on, and then our plan for the school system as a whole as the next 10 years go on. And we're going to try really like to be proactive on that, because those kind of things makes us so much easier to budget, so much easier for other things, because we know then what we're going to do with Shepherdstown Elementary School, Shepherdstown Middle School, the piece of ground we have out in Ranson, what we're doing with Ranson. All of this will be brought into the CFP and make it real easy for us to, at that point, set goals, set parameters, and work from there.
What are the deadlines for the state?
Well, we don't have deadlines for the state at this point, because the state is not always already all the way there.
Okay.
Want to kind of help with the public, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Mark, as well, as for Ms. Roper, because of the fact, as you know, as an employee, it used to be that they would give us money and we would create the CFP. That has all changed this specific year. So they took that money, and the state as a whole is basically trying to come up with maybe a template for every county in the state or every area of the state, so that then that template is what he's talking about with SBA. They're trying to basically figure it out. And then that's going to come to us, and once we get that, then we will get a smaller amount of money, and we are then responsible to work within certain guidelines and parameters that may or may not be what we need here in the Eastern Panhandle, as opposed to, McDowell County. But we don't know that yet, unfortunately. So until they come up with something, we're kind of going blind right now. But I think the goal is here to try to be prepared in case we get it on a Tuesday after a meeting and we don't want to wait 2 more weeks.
Right.
To be able to at least try to get some information.
And Mike told, like I said, I talked to Mike today, and he told me, no question, he believes, now he said that in a really strong tone, but at the same, he believes it'll be in the next couple of weeks, because they're getting ready to have another board meeting, and it would have to be on that board meeting first.
I have a lot of concerns about this
Sure.
area, because this is the state sticking their finger in the middle of this, and I have a feeling it's going to steer a lot of money away from the Eastern Panhandle, first of all. And we need to be as proactive as we can be. I think we need to wait as, a reasonable amount of time, but if they don't come up with something before too long, because they've had an opportunity to do something with this for quite a while and not done anything with it, because they don't know what they're doing. So as long as it's a reasonable amount of time, I don't have a problem with that. But I think we need to be very proactive in this area, or we're going to lose.
That's why I have it on for tonight. That's why I had it on for tonight, trying to be as proactive as I could in this situation.
They have been talking about coming up with 2 different designs for schools for the state, and that's what's going to get built. I don't think that's really going to happen, but that's just plain stupid right off the go. And if that's the way this is going to go,
And I agree with you, Gary. They can't, all schools throughout the state can't be built on this plan or that plan.
And did we get an appointed Eastern Panhandle member, or we now don't have any?
We may or may not have one from the Eastern Panhandle, we hope.
right now we don't, as far as I know.
Right.
The goal, I think, was maybe a Berkeley?
They did make an announcement at the superintendent's conference. They handed us a map that showed who our consultant was. Like, basically, they assigned someone who's your liaison, and ours was changed. However, we haven't met with him yet because they haven't given him any information to give us, because they're still working on this plan. They gave us a sheet of paper with a color-coded map and showed us the name of our new liaison, but we haven't met him yet. I am hopeful that maybe he'll be present at August the 2nd and 3rd. Dr. Payne has asked all of the county superintendents to come to a superintendent summit in Charleston, and that's one of the things that we've requested is we're all holding our plans and need to go based on their movement on this. And earlier when we met in June, they came and simply introduced the new staff and said they didn't have the plan ready. They were looking at an electronic program that would basically one size fits all. We all dump our information on there, and then it almost auto-generates a plan for us. And I think that they quickly abandoned the idea that they could afford that or that it would be feasible. And they're sort of going back and trying to find a plan B hybrid of that. And I don't have any more information about where they're at in that process.
They still don't know what they're doing, basically.
I did not say that, sir, but I do think there's.
I'm just real uncomfortable with this one. I'm very uncomfortable.
Where is
with
this
it.
person from?
That's what I want to know.
He's there. There aren't. I believe there are 4 of the SBA consultants that are assigned for the entire state. And as I said, I haven't met him yet.
Or there's
Yes,
somebody
sir.
they're bringing in?
They're SBA folks. Although SBA has several new employees,
I was gonna say,
and I haven't met this gentleman, so I don't know if he's been reassigned from somewhere else or if he's brand new to SBA. I know he is not the woman that we've been working with for the last 3 years, who we've sent every single plat, every single plan, every single, here are the meetings, here's what we're looking at in terms of land acquisition. So hopefully she will turn all of that over to this new gentleman.
they probably don't even know where it is.
Well, we do, sir.
We
know where it is.
No, but
We're good.
Their copy of it, the way they shuffle things around down there, I wouldn't bet the ranch on it.
No.
All right. Any other discussion? All in favor of going forward with it?
Aye.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chapter 7 Policy Update on Graduation Requirements for 2018-19 Freshman Students.
Yes, Policy 2510 changed effective for this year, which is state policy. Currently, our students are required to obtain 24 high school credits to graduate, and Policy 2510 changed to say that 22 credits would be required for graduation with incoming freshmen. So what I'm presenting with you is a proposal to adopt that as a Jefferson County policy. The 2 credits difference comes from the student electives, where we still have the same requirements for the four language arts, the 4 math, 3 sciences, and 4 social studies. Those are all still in place. What they did, they eliminated the requirement for 2 electives. So you can look at it in 2 ways and say, well, gee, we're requiring less of our students, but it's also giving our students an opportunity to pursue other areas as we looked at more and more of dual credit enrollment and virtual school and embedded credits. It also gives them an opportunity for the students to have a little more flexibility of how they're pursuing those credits also. So I wanted to present that to the board, staying within guidelines of West Virginia Policy 2510.
All right. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second. I have a question. Is this just for incoming freshmen and below then?
Yes.
So current sophomores through
Would continue with the
seniors?
same, right.
Okay.
Right.
How does that work with our WIDA system and trying to keep track of all that?
Is that now manual because it's not all 4, Miss Ross?
And they manage changes in credits yearly, because sometimes
Right.
they've had ones where they change the number of math credits that you had to obtain or social studies credits. One of the inquiries that we did make, because again, there was some concern on the part of our guidance and teaching staff that it was a quote-unquote lower standard, is whether or not we could then create an advanced diploma option for students who would get additional credits and have some requirements around AP or dual enrollment. And we contacted the West Virginia Department of Education, and we do have the option of that locally, but that's a fairly large-scale project for us to sit down and create what the requirements would be for that. So we felt like we could get the 22 credits, and of course, policy still, this is just to put it out on review, even though it's already a state requirement. And then have a committee who could spend this year working and bring a recommendation back to the board for the possibility of having an advanced diploma.
That's exactly what would read my mind. I was hoping that we could do something to recognize those who went ahead and got the 24 credits. Even if it's not a different diploma, but something and I know the chords is like a, we'll talk about those.
Not for me! Put 'em on!
But, something that we identify now, we're talking about 4 years from now, that, each high school said, oh, you got at least 24 credits.
And I think that's actually one of the things that I would love to have some discussion around at your board retreat, because it gives the board an opportunity. For instance, if you wanted to prioritize community service, you could set a here's your minimum graduation requirements, but if you want to go above and beyond and get an honors diploma, get an advanced study diploma, get a, we have the parameters, I say we, you as the board have the authority to create that diploma status and set what requirements, because you can always set something for someone to go above and beyond if they choose to. So some of it is you guys having some thought and maybe some conversation with constituents about what would you like to see, so because you have that flexibility.
I had another question too. If we, on this piece, just as a side here for science, with the 3 credits, Earth and Space Science, and then Biology or AP Biology, it has grade 9 and grade 10. Do we have to have the grades next to them? Because sometimes I know you take those classes at different times, and with the virtual policy and the way that may or may not change, you may take those maybe in 8th grade, or you may take them in 10th grade if you don't do well with that in 9th grade. Or, do you know what I'm saying? Like, is that something that we have to put in there grade-wise? Or
That came from policy 2510. I mean, it's the more important part is that they earn the credit. I think the idea of you're going to get some prerequisite skills by taking the Earth and Space Science first. There's probably something that the state has seen that there's prerequisites going to make biology more successful by taking those classes first. And if you agree with that, Ms. Fitzgerald.
Well, currently we don't allow 10th graders to take AP biology.
Yeah, that's the only reason I had a little bit of a. I mean, technically they should be allowed to do that statewide, and it does happen. My son did it, but I had to push for that, and it was a fight. We have high flyers who could do that in a New York minute. That's not the point. We got to figure out how we can allow them to excel at the same. You know, if they choose to do that, of course, then it's another class and a scheduling thing, and you know that's sometimes difficult as well. But I think my only concern was if we put those grade levels next to them, then I think we're boxing ourselves in for.
That's what I was thinking. As long as the student gets that requirement, passes that requirement.
Yeah,
what
they need
difference does
those
it make if they do it in the 8th grade or 9th grade or whatever? It doesn't make any difference. Because now if there's prereqs involved, they have to do that first. But
Evidently there aren't. And at the conference I was just at this past weekend, they said the only reason why it's biology, chemistry, and physics was because nobody could decide, so they just did it alphabetically. So
Things kind of happen, and then it's because that's how we do it, and it's hard to break that cycle of, but that's how we do it,
right,
kind of thing. And so that's kind of why I want to just say, my recommendation would be that they come off, and we're about figuring out what can the student handle, how do we do that, let's do what's best for the student, and let them move on.
I would have to go to our program of studies too. Probably has that in it as far as the sequence of the courses. So in this form itself, you're looking at taking the grade 9 and grade 10 off of the chart there.
I mean, the counselors know when they're scheduling kids that typically they take 9th grade science, which is earth science traditionally. But if, again, as things progress and move forward, even 1 or 2 years from now, if you have a child who is taking that at a different grade, or is able to do 2 at once, we just don't know what you're going to get. I just don't want to box kids in if they don't have to be, but that was my only thought on that one.
a whole lot of this is supposed to, you got 4 boxes there you've got to fill up, so that's the way they do it. They fill it up, but that does not necessarily have anything at all to do with the learning curve.
Right.
one other comment of something I read in there that it said under foreign languages, it had on there, please note some 4-year institutions require 2 years of the same language. I think we need to adjust that or take that out or do something with it, because a lot of 4-year institutions require 3 or 4 years of the same language, or not just 2. So we want to make sure that we're not falsely advertising, the requirements of certain 4-year institutions.
Or put 2 or 3 years so that they can check into it
or up
themselves.
to 3 or something.
Yeah.
Or have their own minimum requirements, or just something. Not that we're saying they only require 2.
Yeah, I think 2 is misleading.
Would you like to say up to what? How did you say that? Up to
3, or
Or
up
put
to
may
3 or
require
4.
2 or 3 or 4.
Or may
How
maybe
require
up to 4
additional.
would say that then.
Yeah, may require 2 or more years, and then you're kind of encompassing whatever the requirement is. It could be 3, it could be 4 if it's 2 or more. And then you could put a footnote on the bottom, please check your institution of interest for, that way it allows the parent to realize, I didn't think to ask about that. But
Any further discussion?
let's see. Oh, the only thing else I was going to ask about was the health on here. It now has the Weavis course. Is that just because it's all the same, or how did that change? Sorry. Of course, it caught my eye.
I do think that the state has every intention of offering the integrated PE course.
Okay.
However, none of our PE teachers have been offered the training in delivering the online portion, which is a requirement. I think maybe I am telling myself that they are being proactive and including that in the policy.
Okay. Okay.
That is pure speculation on my part, but we can find out.
Okay.
Well, it does list in the policy the interactive PE, or
Integrative?
Right.
Separately?
Correct. And so is that something that we are going to be offering this fall?
This school year, we're not offering. I think that's our goal, is to work on that, speaking with our principals and counselors, and just that don't feel like wouldn't be doing it justice trying to develop it right now. It's what we're going to work on this year with the hope of implementation for next school year. Just at the time getting answers from the state on some things and how it just wasn't moving along quick enough.
Okay. Any other comments? All in favor of putting it out for review?
Aye.
All right. Mr. Blanc, is this you again?
It is. I'm here for a little while. Chapter 6 is as far as our acceptable use policy for electronics. This is reflective of state changes. We'll see this in Chapter 6 for employees, and then Chapter 8 following this for student use. A couple little differences, but the primary changes is on the second page. They start to talk more and more about the appropriate social use of digital electronic communication. I think it just starts to address where etiquette and the proper way of using it, and the inappropriate things, how it should not be used. I think as we saw an increase in use of that across the nation, whether it's texting, emailing, or whatever. So that looks like that they try to address that as far as being good citizens when using electronic media. That once again, these are straight from the state. It's not created from us. That a couple changes where the access emails were still in there, which the state did away with several years ago, where we now have the K-12 email addresses. And part to highlight just about the violation of policies, the consequences that could come from disciplinary action, loss of use. To just highlight those. I think once again, these are all reflective of increased use of electronic media. That
So do we have a motion? Second?
Second. The only, so you said this comes from the state. I saw where it says licensure revocation or prosecution. You said this comes from the state, and I'm just wondering if we should just put that in the state. Put that worded so that the state will revoke your...
Well, might be us revoking if we see inappropriate use. We, as a system, have the ability to...
Are you talking about software licensure or teaching licensure?
Use of oh, okay. Well, that would come. Yeah, that would come from the state. Yeah, discipline would come from a loss of licensure would come from the state.
Yeah. So I was saying maybe we should just make that known that licensure revocation from the state, because we don't have the power to revoke their state license, state issued license. Under Chapter 6, Personnel. 6, user responsibilities, violation of use policies could result in loss of access, personal payment of fees incurred, employment, discipline, licensure, I can't say the word, revocation, and/or prosecution. Other consequences for students may also be found in Policy 4373.
So that's cover the students and the family.
Yeah, I just wanted to
Yeah,
state that it's
4373 is for both students and.
right, but I just wanted to state that the licensure revocation will come from the state. The state may revoke your license.
That's the only place it can come from.
Right, but
we would be
what-
requesting it.
but still, we can't revoke it.
No, but it doesn't say that we're revoking it. It just says they could lose their license.
I guess it's like prosecute. I guess we could prosecute. We wouldn't be the one. I mean,
Right,
like
but
if
we
someone's
are
doing.
the ones taking it.
The one thing I was slightly confused about, if this is the personnel section, there was a section in here talking about students and parental consent. I thought the student portion was before that.
It's that chapter 8. That's the next one. The student one is the next one.
Well, this chapter 6, number 4, has parental consent. And then under user responsibilities, it has student responsibilities.
Yeah, all number 4. That's that I can look in that and see if that's how why that is there.
But maybe it's the employee has to make sure that they get the parents' consent when they're working with the students, maybe?
Informing the employees, the staff, that you have to have that before students are using, making them aware that you have to have parent consent before the students are using technology.
Well, this is talking about the students must have written parental consent, and then a parent may rescind the consent at any time, terminating the student's use of this service. I mean, it seems like it should be in Chapter 8, not in Chapter 6.
Right, but what he's saying that as an employee, if I'm working with students, I need to make sure I get the parents' consent, and they can revoke it at any time. Rescind it.
And it may be in both, that sentence may be in both this chapter and the other chapter, but we should check on that to be sure.
Certainly do that.
Or put something on there at the top instead of just parental consent needed from staff, or needs to be attained by staff or something, like the number 4 instead of just parental consent.
Yeah, I think you're going to see the exact same thing over in the same statement, which you're going to see a lot of similarities in these two policies from 6 and 8. Some differences about school websites and dissemination of information, use of information gathered, the major differences between the employee one and the student one.
Any other comments on Chapter 6? All in favor of putting it out for public review?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
So
D, Chapter 8 policy.
right, like I say, this is just about identical, but there are some things that are not in this. It's in an employee policy. Primarily, we talk about website design, and as far as the collection and maintenance of data, what a school system or what the state can do with that, which that's not part of the student policy. And the final sign-off page is different because it's for students and their parents to sign off on, where the other was an employee. The differences that I saw in the two policies.
So do we have a motion for Chapter 8?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
And if you look at number 4 under chapter 8, it's almost exactly the same.
Right.
So, you might want to put something in the previous policy in 6 that staff needs to attain parental consent as the bullet point, just so you can see the difference between.
So, any further discussion on Chapter 8? All in favor? Opposed? All right. E.
One more policy. Remember I guess maybe about 3 years ago, I think we did our retest policies where if a student made a 70 or below, they had the opportunity to take a retest. And at that time, our grading scale was on a 7-point grading scale where 93 to 100 was an A. And since that time, we've changed this. The state has changed to a 10-point grading scale where 70 is actually the lowest C you can get. So once again, the purpose was that to try to salvage students who have bombed the test, and the C is not usually seen as terrible to the eyes of some folks. Others, I know it's horrific, but recommendations was moved out to a 65, which is a mid-D, which the 70 was at one time. It would have been a mid-D, so it's just trying to move it in a similar position where how the policy was written. So if a student gets a 65 or below, they have the option of requesting a retest. Everything else would stay the same in the policy, just that score would be 65 instead of 70.
All right. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion or questions or comments?
Kind of have a question.
You always have a question.
I know. I guess my question is I think we should put this out for review and we need to talk about this, but in the culmination of this, because it just says retest and that the student, if they earn less than a 65 on the test, can remediate it. With the teacher, a verbal or written notification, well, we have a different policy for one specific course. If you're testing out, the testing out policy is different. I think we really need to look at why there are different grade options for different classes. I don't think that that's a fair policy in any way, shape, or form.
Which one don't you think is fair?
So, such as health, when you're testing out for health, if you don't have above an 80%, you fail that test. Which if you have to have the culmination of all the material, and the grading policy states that, now a 65 even you can remediate and take it again, but yet health tests you can't take again, number one. Number two, if you have to have an 80% or above to pass that specific test, and you only get one test all year to pass the class, how is that necessarily the right thing? I mean, again, I think it's a conversation.
I think it's probably more rigorous because when you're in the class for the full year, you're doing a lot. We're doing presentations, you're doing some research, you're participating in class discussions where you're not doing any of that on the test out. You're just taking one test. That's your only measure. Mm-hmm. So I feel certain that's why our curriculum people and health people feel that needs to be a higher standard, because you're just having that one measure. You're not getting you're not getting a robust education in health. Otherwise, you're sitting answering questions, and that's pretty much it.
Again, I'm just up to have at least a debate about it, because if it is just one test, but yet in order to pass it, I have to have an 80% or higher, I don't know how that's fair and equitable when you can have less than that to take other exams and consider passing.
Not for testing out, though. Just
right. But for testing out, is that the only thing we test down? I think that it is.
No, we have other classes for test out.
And all of them are 80?
Yeah.
Or above?
They're all 80.
Yeah. If this is for testing out, though, don't you think that the student at that point ought to demonstrate a higher
mastery
understanding of that, rather than just say, okay, I'm passing the 65?
Again, I personally do, but if it's having to pass to, do you know what I'm saying? I don't know. I'd like to have that discussion. I think that they need more than 3 to 4 weeks to test for it, but that's a whole other
ball of wax.
Discussion.
Yeah.
As I say,
But
we have that
anyway.
for, English and the sciences and math as far as the ability to test out. We have students that attempt to test out a lot of other courses. Health, you get the majority of them, I think, because it's anticipated. I know health, I don't need health. It's just getting in my way of my schedule so I can go, which is another good benefit for going down to 22 credits of graduation. Maybe there's a little more room in the schedule. I mean, we could debate it. This isn't the time, but you look at West Virginia and our health numbers, compare us to the nation. It's like maybe we should focus on health a little more than we do,
Well, and in some ways, we have taken the steps to do that because now we offer it in elementary school, where we never did before. But now, we start to learn the musculoskeletal system and everything else in 3rd, 4th grade, and we have parameters for teachers that they have to hit even in elementary school. So I think that's a good change we've made. I agree. We need more health education. But, yeah, anyway, that was my only thought with that grade average.
All right. So all in favor of putting Chapter 7 policy on the retest after failure out for public review?
Aye.
Thank you,
Intent.
Mr.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Intent to purchase letter for replacement school buses? Hello.
In this situation, we're doing as we always do every year. This is an every year kind of situation where we go out to bid, we go out and get buses. The state gives us the money for the buses, and what their theory is on the money really is about how many buses we have that are over 200,000 miles and 15 years old. So they use that as a way to give us money for this. This year we were given $677,000. We were actually given $777,000. Some of that will be used for our budget and work within the budget, our regular budget. And we'll be able to buy 4 regular size buses, just like 77 passenger. And then we'll be able to buy 2 self-contained, like we call them special buses. We'll say that they're a little smaller, not much. These are not the little tiny buses, but just a little bit smaller. And they have like 56. However, those will also have air conditioning in them. Just those buses, not all the buses, but just the special needs buses will have air conditioning and a lift. And we would be looking at getting them through Massini Motors, who we've worked with years and years all the time, and they'd be Thomas buses. Just
All right, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second. Are we standardizing our buses?
we are starting to standardize our buses. We have found some problems with the buses that we'd had in the past, and according to the people that we have and the mechanics, they like the Thomas bus better right now. Every year they were trying to keep the same kind of buses, though, because it saves us in parts, it saves us in labor and other things, because we know what bus we have that deploy.
Same engines?
They're all the same engine, yeah. All the buses use, well, we have 2, but they're older buses. They're Mercedes, but most of them are an international brand of engine.
Are the majority of the buses we have, are you saying Thomas buses or?
No, not at this point. But that was a decision made by our staff at the bus garage. They believe this is the best bus, the best price right now.
Are we going to be replacing one for one the 4 regular buses and the 2 special buses?
We haven't made that decision exactly what we're taking out at this point of the rotation. But they've set them aside. They do have some idea, but it won't be one for one. I think we'll still be maybe one bus up, because we're still going to have to pull some of those buses that cost us more money than they do to keep them. You know, a lot of times when you get them over 200,000 miles and more than 15 years, they're difficult to keep. and we end up putting engines in them, transmissions, and other things that cost a great deal of money. All these, of course, also have a warranty, so for the next 3 years, their warranty would stay fine. Actually, it's 5, because we pay for the extra.
So Ralph, what is the benefit to getting the smaller 56-passenger bus?
They're for special ed normally.
Right, but I know typically we don't have 56 special ed kids. We
No,
usually
no,
have
but
10 maybe on a bus
yeah.
or less.
Most of them 10 or so. We had bought little buses last year, some really little buses, that hold like 20. But those buses, our mechanics don't believe that that's the bus we should have in the future. And we allowed them, worked with them and made sure that they are right. Those buses are gas and they just have some different kind of changes and things with them. We thought it was a great idea last year. Because they were only $55,000 a piece, not $100,000 a piece, which all of these are, all the other buses are about 100 to 120 a piece.
I guess that's my only question. If we're not gonna go with the smaller bus and we have to have a bigger bus, does it behoove us? Does it save that much money in gas to go from a 55 to a 77-passenger bus? Or do we just have those bigger buses because then we can use them for either one or either run if necessary? Do you know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying, yeah.
Just trying to...
And what we're doing, though, is lots of times, most of the time, when we have that, it's running a really big bus to pick up, like you said.
Right.
10 kids, maybe 8. 2. We have some that are very, very small. Amount of kids on them, depending on their location, because some of those students live very far in Jefferson County that you have to pick up and move on. So we also have a great deal of students that go out of the state, and being out of the state, we did have an accident last year, and that larger bus made them. Our mechanics over and over said, if that accident would have happened with the smaller bus, it wouldn't have been as good. They really like the little bit larger bus, like the 56, and not the big one.
Are we using the little buses that we purchased?
Yes, every day. Mm-hmm. Well, not in the summer, but every day.
Right.
Actually, in the summer, too. I've seen a couple going toward their out of county placement. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that's what we use, every time what we use them for. The real small ones are used for special ed.
And the mechanics don't like them because they use gasoline.
Well, they use gasoline.
Diesel?
They have a different body style. They have different brakes. They're for them having an issue.
I'm just wondering if we do get more little buses instead of the medium bus, if it's more cost effective to run them and, purchase them, if we had a mechanic who is specially trained on, those 8 buses or whatever, however number we end up with.
Well, and that's something we can check into to see if we can get somebody trained, especially trained to work.
It's a little bit, if you've got 4 to 6 little buses like that, and you, out of a troop of 130, it's a little hard to train somebody just for that.
Right.
So it's and plus that you have to have all different parts.
Right.
Everything.
We thought we were going that way with more, but they again, sometimes when you get something, you have it in your hand and then you think, well, we don't like it as much as we thought we would. And again, last year trying to get more buses. Because we have the same today, even when I talk to Larry, he's like looking down the list, and we have a couple, probably 4 bus drivers that'll go right from sub to a regular bus run this year. So, like straight up sub bus run, not a sub. Really, never have subbed. Just are new to the system, and they'll get a bus route this year because we are that low.
And my final question is, the 4 regular buses, they're not going to have AC on them?
They don't. They don't. We normally don't buy them that way. We haven't normally, ever.
Is it just because of cost?
It's cost, yeah.
Cost to buy them and cost to maintain.
Also cost of maintenance on it. For air conditioning in a bus breaks down a lot, and it makes it more difficult. Now, we've gotten a brand new machine from a different company, and we really do like that machine to help us with the recharging of the air conditioning units and things like that we need to. But there's still a maintenance issue for all of us.
But that 55-person bus is going to have air
Yes,
conditioning.
the 55-person bus will have air conditioning, both of them, there's two of them. And they will have air conditioning and a lift gate. The lift gate is interesting too, because actually, we put the lift gate with that bus a great deal because of what we get returned from blank there.
Medicare?
Medicare, right. Correct. Thank you, Pat. Medicare. And the Medicare reimbursement for one child actually pays for that upgrade. And we can get that Medicare for year after year after year. One child, 1 year. You get that amount of money back from them. So, but if you don't have a lift on the bus, even though that child doesn't need a lift, if they're a Medicare child, they won't take it. They won't pay us their fees. So we have to have a lift on the bus if that is a Medicare child that we are moving, even if they don't need the lift. Which I thought was interesting as we work through some of these processes.
Those AC systems on those buses eat up a lot of fuel too.
All in favor of putting it out, the intent to purchase letter for replacement school buses?
All right.
Aye.
Thank you.
See, and as kids, I never knew why I didn't have air conditioning on the bus, but now I know.
The school board was too cheap.
There you go.
Now you know.
All right, very good. So the next item on the agenda tonight is actually not so new as much as it is just an FYI for the board. As we continue to examine our human capital across the system, we're seeking to evaluate job descriptions and parity of responsibilities amongst similar and like jobs across the district. And as we do that, we make adjustments when and where we can with the least amount of impact to current employees. So for example, such is the case with this particular position. We have two positions that are similar in the school district, and as we analyze those positions this year, we took a look at how we might be able to make the change and make the positions more effective in terms of the extra days associated with it and serving the needs of students. And so this position actually is vacant right now. So we took the opportunity to make this change and adjustment to make it a 210 position. It had been receiving supplemental payments of 10 days. So we just consolidated it and made it a chair position because there's two, one for each high school. And this one is vacated, so we went on to make that change, but wanted to bring it to the board's attention tonight so that you see that. And just know that as we proceed forward throughout the rest of the year, we'll be doing similar types of things with positions as we see them and we find these positions that don't have parity with them in terms of the number of days, but the same person's doing the same responsibilities, and this happens to just represent one of those tonight. So we just wanted to bring it to your attention, that's all.
Thank you. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
discussion?
Is this one position or two positions?
2 positions total. There's one at each high school.
Well, okay, that's what I thought.
I thought it was one person going back and forth to each high school.
No.
I was like, oh, that's pretty neat. Like,
I thought that's
busy
where-
Friday.
yeah,
Right.
okay.
There's 2 positions.
Correct.
Any other questions?
Oh, how will they work with the IEP coordinators?
How will they work with the IEP coordinators? Well, they're primarily the coordinator between principals and the teachers. So they will kind of serve as the lead person in the school.
These basically are the IEP coordinators.
Yeah,
What would
they
you
are
say
the
call them?
IEP coordinators, yeah.
Oh, they're the IEP coordinators.
Yeah.
Very closely.
One and the same.
You're right, it's the
They graduate
exact same thing. They've just
Okay.
been giving them 200-day contracts and then paying them 10 extra days every year. We went back and we have records for as far back as we can find. They just paid them for 10 extra days, but they're not in their contract. And so just us trying to
Clean
clean
up
up
some
some inconsistencies around this.
So, chairperson. How'd you come up with the title chairperson?
It matches with all the science department chair, the English department chair. So basically, they become a special education department chair.
Okay, so they'll teach special education classes, but they'll also have those special duties like the science chair and the English chair. Is that what you mean?
No, these are non-teaching positions. These are just the leads, IEP folks in the school.
So the special education teachers, they'll sort of like be their mentor, their boss? I'm just trying to...
The principal essentially is their boss because that's the administrator for the building that they're in, but they serve as the independent, if you will, IEP coordinator amongst all IEP activities within the building.
I guess, did we change it from coordinator to chair? I'm wondering why you changed it from coordinator to chairperson. What was the...
Well, number one, coordinator would not be an accurate description for what we have in our certified list, according to West Virginia State Code. That would not be an accurate description of it. And in terms of parity, again, we're making sure that as we align and coordinate these with IEP consultants, that we're not differentiating something that's really not the case. So that we got guidance from legal counsel with regard to that and made sure that that aligned properly in terms of its job title.
Okay, but do you understand my confusion? You said they're the same as like a science chairperson, but science chairs usually teach science.
Yes.
But they won't actually teach
No, their
class.
full-time duty is to coordinate IEPs. And that is clearly a full-time job.
Although I think to Ms. Roper's point, when they began these, they still say their job description says that they're chairperson. And I think when the special education populations were smaller at the high school, and if they were ever to be smaller, or we were to, build another high school and bring them out, they have the capacity. And at middle school, they do. They teach classes and they coordinate this. I think the populations just got so big at the high schools that they eventually ended up moving so much of the paperwork, the Medicaid billing and the IEP eligibility, that they essentially, taught less and less and did more of the administrative piece of special ed until, you're right, the others, their duties didn't essentially change that much from being chair people. They get an extra duty period to be the chairperson and stipend to be the chairperson. But special ed has grown to such an extent that I'm not sure when the last time the high school chairperson for special ed actually taught a special ed class. They haven't since I've been here.
So we have one of these at each high school.
Yes, sir.
And that's it throughout the whole county.
So does it say that it's a non-teaching position?
It asks for teaching experience so that they can obviously relate to the the teachers that are dealing with IEPs, but there's nothing that's specifically requiring them to teach.
So I will point out that next year's, and this may help, next year's enrollment at Washington High School of Special Education students is 117, and at Jefferson High School it's 151 in terms of caseload management eligibility.
I'm concerned of how eligible candidates will know what type of position that it is. If they're used to IEP coordinator and they're used to chair of a certain department, especially at a high school, how are we going to advertise that this is essentially the traditional IEP coordinator position?
I'm not quite sure I know how to answer your question. Maybe because I don't understand.
I think IEP coordinators, when they really haven't been assigned as an IEP coordinator, played that role as a coordinator. Ms. Fitzgerald, you might be able to help me on this some as far as that title really hasn't been it's been kind of a self-imposed title. Jobs weren't posted as IEP coordinator. But there's a responsibility they gave to coordinate IEPs, but
so would it?
I think if they read down through the job description as well, and if you look down under special education duties and responsibilities, it specifically says coordinate the IEP process within the school, including preparation for attending and facilitating. So I think if somebody sees, chairperson of special education program, somebody who's either served as an IEP coordinator or any other position in special ed that had interest in special ed would look at that, look at the qualifications, and then look directly down to the duties and what am I supposed to do, and looks it very clearly under duties and responsibilities explains what that would be. But
so would it be too much trouble to add like a little parentheses similar to or formally known as IEP coordinator? Just because when people look for jobs, they kind of just like look at the list and it's listed so that you can pick out familiar things to you quickly. It's summertime, we're posting it. They may not watch this television.
We never hired high school IEP coordinators. We never had high school, we had the two middle school, elementary school, middle school had coordinators at one time. We moved away from that model, but the high school never had a person was hired as an IEP coordinator. Before this, the principal looked for a teacher who they could give a lesser duty to and give them that role. And it used to be like maybe 50% of your job would be to help to coordinate the IEPs, but they never had that title. And then somewhere along the line, then we changed that up to where they became department heads with that responsibility to do those things, but it was department head. There was never a high school IEP coordinator official on a job description.
I get all of that. I was just trying to see how we can communicate that to, potential candidates so that during the summer, you want to put this out tomorrow, I would think, that we just give it some type of title so that people say, oh yeah, I'm kind of familiar with that. Let me look at this even deeper. That's all I was wondering if we could. Doesn't have to be part of the formal title, just something.
And certainly titles do both. The state uses them in certain counts depending on what they are for both stipends and for the number of administrative positions that you have. And so coordinator means something, facilitator means something, and not having had high school coordinators previously, if we changed it from, although it doesn't sound like you're proposing that we change it from chairperson to coordinator, I'm just not sure how, other than reading the job description, we'd put a parentheses of a different title.
What, non-teaching special? Because if we put non-teaching, then a lot of times people think you need an administrative degree.
I think anyone internal who applies for this knows exactly what it is. That you're right, external folks may look at this and I would hope they would read the job description. But if there's some way you think we can improve on that job description.
If you get down to the job description, it's pretty clear cut. Number one is act as a liaison of special education to the principal and department chairs. And then, as Ms. Ogden said, coordinate the IEP process within the school. So I think anybody searching through and reading this will see chairperson special ed, And if that's what they're searching for, hopefully they would open it up, read the job description, and say, oh, well, that's something that I can do.
Are we putting non-teaching in the description, or not, just in case you need them to teach a class?
I was going to say, I think the more you add in there, the more you're going to.
Because like we said, if the population reduces, then we would not have that option.
Okay. All right.
Any further discussion?
Call for question.
All right. All in favor of posting the chairperson for special education programs?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Oh, one other thing. I'm sorry. Are you going to post it as 2 positions? Because I thought it was 1 position going back and forth.
No, we're just handling right now the current position that's vacant. So we'll return at some point with regard to the adjustment to the other one, and we'll show that on the consent agenda.
The Jefferson position is the only one that's vacant right now.
Actually, so the Washington one is
I'm
vacant.
sorry.
You could just put that on the...
She's like, no,
Sorry,
don't
the
give me one
Washington
more.
one is.
Terrifying like that.
Sorry.
I know we already voted, but Mr. Pettiford, is it possible to put which location you're actually hiring for on the job description?
It will show that on the posting within SearchSoft. It shows the location of where the position is posted for.
It won't have both schools like you have it here.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pettiford.
All right.
Yes, sir.
H, action on approval to post a new position, kindergarten teacher and ECAT kindergarten aide.
Actually, we are removing that from the agenda for a request. We do have a excessive level of kindergarten enrollment at South Jefferson Elementary School, but in going back through our numbers currently at Page Jackson, we have 6 kindergarten teachers on staff there, and for the last several years, they have run an enrollment of 138 kindergartners, and this year they're running 94. They are significantly below their normal enrollment. So at this point, we are simply going to transfer that position over to South Jefferson. If miraculously somehow in the closing weeks before school starts, Paige Jackson zooms back up, we may come back to the board, but we have more than nearly 2 positions worth of room right there. As you know, the max for a kindergarten is 23. So at this point, we can make those shifts and accommodate the growth at South Jefferson.
All right, so we would move the teacher and not the children.
Not moving the children, no ma'am.
Okay.
Which we do really try to avoid given the numbers. It's hard when they set limits and you're 3 kids over to hire a full-time teacher and an aide.
I know.
Just financially, we can't do it.
All right. So the assistant superintendent contracts.
I believe the request was that we discuss that in executive session.
All right. So that's it, other than the executive?
Which we also have if I'm not mistaken, a request for a leave of absence extension.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so do we have a motion to go into executive session for personnel issues?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.